They say life can change in a single moment. And for me, that moment came on a quiet afternoon I will never forget. I was a young man, full of dreams, full of plans. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, but I had something that mattered. I had hope. I believed that if I worked hard, if I stayed humble, life would reward me. My biggest worries were about the future, how to build a career, how to take care of my family, how to make something of myself. But all of that disappeared in a heartbeat. It started with a knock at the door. Loud, aggressive, the kind of knock that makes your heart skip. When I opened it, there they were, policemen standing like executioners in black boots, with eyes that already judged me guilty. I remember the confusion in my mother's face as she stood behind me. I remember asking, "What is happening?" But they didn't answer. They grabbed me, twisted my arms, and in seconds, cold steel handcuffs closed around my wrists. They said I was a suspect in a crime I didn't even understand. A robbery, a violent attack. I can't even explain because I had nothing to do with it. I tried to speak, I begged them to listen, but once those cuffs were on, my voice no longer mattered. To them, I was already guilty. The world I knew collapsed that day. My neighbors stared. Some whispered. Some shook their heads. My mother cried out, holding on to me, but they pushed her away. That walk from my house to the police felt like walking through fire. Every step burned, not because of pain in my body, but because of the shame and humiliation crushing my spirit. The police station was no better. Questions fired at me like bullets, accusations I couldn't defend against because the truth didn't matter. They had witnesses, false witnesses. They had evidence, fabricated. And in a system where the poor man's voice means nothing, my innocence drowned in their lies. The trial was a blur. I didn't even have a strong lawyer. Just a man who nodded, shuffled papers, and said little. When the judge's gavel came down and the word guilty echoed through the courtroom, it felt like a death sentence. My mother wailed in the back. I felt my legs go weak. But there was no mercy. That was the beginning of my prison life. Prison is another world. When those gates closed behind me for the first time, I knew I had entered a place where time moved differently. The air was heavy, the walls thick with despair, the cries of broken men echoing in the corridors. At first, I tried to hold on to my innocence. I prayed. I told myself the truth would one day come out. I believed God would not abandon me. But prison has a way of eating hope, piece by piece. The first nights were the worst. Sleepless, lying on a hard, dirty mattress, surrounded by men whose faces told stories of pain and crime. Some stared at me like prey. Some ignored me completely. I cried silently, muffling my sobs so no one would hear. Every creak of the metal bars reminded me that I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. I kept telling myself, "Be strong. Don't lose faith." But inside, I was terrified. The older prisoners could smell weakness. They mocked me, bullied me, sometimes stole what little food I had. One night, one of them tried to hurt me. I fought back, not because I was brave, but because I had no choice. That night, something inside me snapped. The boy who believed in fairness, in kindness, in justice, he began to die. Prison teaches you its own laws, rules written in blood and fear. You learn quickly that weakness gets you crushed. So I learned to be hard. I learned to fight, to use my fists before someone else used theirs. I learned to steal to survive, to trick others before they tricked me. At first, every violent act broke me. I hated what I was becoming. But slowly, it became normal, necessary. In prison, violence isn't evil, it's survival. And survival becomes the only thing that matters. I made friends. Not the kind of friends you share dreams with, but the kind you share survival with. Men who killed, who stole, who destroyed. We bonded, not out of love, but out of need. Each of us was drowning, and we clung to each other just to stay afloat. Some taught me how to make weapons from scraps. Others showed me how to cheat the guards. Step by step, scar by scar, I became one of them. Every mark on my body told a story. A fight won, a fight lost, a betrayal survived, a night spent in solitary confinement. My reflection in the cracked mirror no longer showed the innocent man I once was. My eyes grew colder, my voice harsher, my heart heavier. I wasn't innocent anymore. not in spirit. 6 years. 6 long years I spent behind those walls. And then, like a cruel joke, they told me I was free. They said my case had been reviewed, that maybe there had been a mistake. Just like that. No apology, no explanation. Just you can go. Walking out of prison should have been the happiest day of my life. But it wasn't. Because the man who stepped outside was not the same man who had walked in. Prison had carved me, broken me, reshaped me into something unrecognizable. When I saw the sun, I didn't feel joy. I felt strange. The air felt different. The streets felt unfamiliar. Freedom didn't feel like freedom. It felt like another kind of prison. People looked at me differently. They whispered behind my back. To them, I was not a man proven innocent. I was an ex-convict. A criminal. A dangerous man. No one asked about my truth. No one cared about the injustice. All they saw was my past. All they saw was the label burned into me by prison. And slowly, I began to believe it too. If the world already saw me as a criminal, then maybe being one was easier. I tried to fight it. I tried to start fresh. But doors closed in my face. Employers said no. Friends avoided me. Even family treated me like a stranger. I felt like I had nowhere to go but back. Back to the streets. Back to the life prison had forced me to learn. And the streets welcomed me like an old friend. Because once you are broken, crime feels like the only thing that fits. When I stepped out of prison after 6 years, I thought I had been set free. But the truth is, prison had followed me. It was in my eyes, in my walk, in the way people looked at me. Freedom felt strange, like wearing clothes that didn't fit anymore. At first, my family welcomed me home. My mother cried as she hugged me, holding me like she never wanted to let go. My siblings smiled, but I could see the hesitation in their eyes. They didn't know the man I had become. Even as I sat at my old dining table, eating food I had dreamed about in prison, I felt like a guest in my own life. The neighbors whispered. They pointed. To them, I was the ex-convict. It didn't matter that I was wrongly accused. It didn't matter that I had suffered for a crime I didn't commit. The stain of prison is not something you can wash off. I tried to start fresh. I knocked on doors, searching for work. Every interview ended the same way. The moment they asked about my past, the moment I mentioned prison, the smiles disappeared. "We'll get back to you," they would say. But they never did. I walked the streets for days, carrying rejection after rejection. Employers didn't see a man desperate to rebuild his life. They saw a criminal. Even old friends avoided me. Some crossed the street when they saw me coming. Others offered fake smiles, but never invited me close again. And so, loneliness crept in. The world outside prison was supposed to be free, yet I felt more trapped than ever. At least in prison, I knew my place. Out here, I was invisible. A ghost. Then came the streets. At first, I resisted. I told myself I wouldn't go back to the life I learned in prison. But the hunger, the rejection, the constant judgment, they wore me down. The only people who didn't push me away were the ones who lived outside the law. They didn't care about my past. In fact, they respected it. To them, prison was a badge of honor. And so I slipped back. Slowly at first. Small jobs. Small risks. But crime is like quicksand. Once you step in, it pulls you deeper. I became good at it. Too good. The survival skills I learned in prison became my weapons on the streets. I fought. I stole. I hustled. And every time I told myself it was just for survival, just until I found something better. But better never came. The boy who once dreamed of a decent life was gone. In his place was a man shaped by anger, bitterness, and the harsh lessons of prison. Then came the day that changed everything. It was supposed to be just another job. Quick, clean, in and out. But life doesn't always follow the plan. Something went wrong. Shots were fired. People were hurt. And when the sirens wailed, I knew it was over. This time, there was no escape. The police caught me red-handed. No lies. No false accusations. The evidence was there. The witnesses were real. My own hands were stained. As I sat in the courtroom, memories of my first trial came rushing back. Back then, I had shouted my innocence. This time, I had no words. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Prison had made me a criminal, and the streets had sealed it. The judge looked at me with cold eyes. The words came like thunder, sentenced to death. My mother screamed from the back. My knees went weak. I closed my eyes, but the words kept echoing. Death, death, death. Now I sit in a small, cold cell, waiting for the end. Death row, a place where time slows even more than prison. Every sound, the clanging of keys, the footsteps of guards, the cries of other condemned men, feels heavier. Nights are the worst. Alone with my thoughts, I replay every choice, every mistake. Sometimes I think back to that young man I once was. The boy who dreamed of building a good life. The boy who believed in justice. The boy who cried when he first entered prison. That boy died long ago. I was not born a criminal. I was made into one. The system that accused me wrongly, the prison that hardened me, the world that rejected me, they all played their part. And maybe I played mine too, by giving up hope, by letting anger consume me. Now I wait. I wait for the final chapter of my life. Not as the innocent man I once was, but as the man prison forced me to become. If you are listening to my story, remember this. Not every criminal was born evil. Some were made by a world too quick to judge and too blind to see. And when society abandons a man, it creates the very monster it fears. So, when they finally call my name, when they lead me to that final place, I will not cry. I will not beg. I will simply walk forward, carrying the truth inside me, that once, long ago, I was innocent.